Feel how peaceful it is to enjoy a couple of beautiful, deep breath cycles here. It's a chance to pause from all the busyness that tends to flood toward us. So the intention we're working on today is the idea of perspective, especially as it gets closer and closer to an election date. I tend to notice people getting more and more polarized. My perspective is correct, and they won't listen to or consider anything else. And to me, it kind of hurts my heart a little bit to be so divided when I know that ultimately the only true reality is love. And with division, any division at all, we're separating ourselves from love. And so today, our hope and our idea that we're going to be working with is perspective. As I was meditating on perspective this morning, I realized that we're given two eyes to be able to see depth. If we only had one eye, we would easily be reaching a hand for something and have to feel around rather than knowing exactly where our hand should go to grab something. We might walk into walls much more frequently because with only one eye, the depth isn't there. But having the perspective of two eyes working together is something that nature has built into us to make it so that we are open and we're able to view things from multiple places. And that helps to give us that depth that we need to be safe. And so the idea as we travel through class, I know oftentimes in these slow classes, I tend to keep my eyes closed and go deeply inward. The idea that we're working with most of the class today is actually keeping the eyes open and really taking nothing for granted, seeing everything with fresh eyes as if it was the first time you've ever seen it. And so as we start to take the knees into the chest here, give your low back a couple of gentle circles, starting to awaken that beautiful area of the body. And then the first pose that we're going to build up is sliding our hands up to the outside edges of feet to take happy baby pose. And in happy baby pose here, view everything that you can see from this perspective. You can be in movement, you can be in stillness, it's all up to you, but really keep the eyes open. Notice the feet and what they look like when they're in front of the chest like this. Notice how much of the body is visible and how much is hidden from our perspective right now. And notice the space beyond. Notice the ceiling. And notice what you can easily let your eyes view around the room. We're trying to take away our viewpoint. We're taking away any associations we've had with any of the objects that might be visible right now. Even if it's something we see every single day of our life, like maybe a mirror or a ceiling or a wall, try to view this with fresh eyes as if we're a baby. Because this perspective that we have right at this moment is exactly the perspective that a baby has when they first come into the earth and they're settled into their cradle. They lay on their back, they can't lift their head up or down, they can't roll over. They can only view this, their feet and the room from this place. And so think back on that baby perspective. Think back to perhaps the blank slate we were born with. the viewpoint of having no judgments, having no societal influences. It's just you viewing this space for the first time, having no clue what things are for. Eventually you'll learn. But having that more infinite perspective of it could be anything. If you think of animals, they have that perspective because what you view as a pencil, it only has one purpose, to write. The dog might see other purposes for it. This might be something fun to bury. This might be a good chew toy. They view it for anything, for what it is, for what it could be, instead of just the one purpose that we've dictated it to be. So now as we're starting to head to the last couple of breaths of this shape, begin to add little movements, perhaps rocking around a bit more. Feel the low back. Notice how you can feel it without having to see it. Maybe you take a few good moments, letting one leg at a time extend clear up to the sky, and eventually switching it out. And keep those wiggles and those movements going on as long as it still feels very helpful. When we're ready to release from Happy Baby altogether, our hands release, our knees join together, and then we allow our knees to start falling over to the left side. Shoulders can open, knees fall to the left. And as we start to evolve this pose, we can absolutely choose to just be in the spinal twist. That might be exactly what our body's asking for. I'll give you a few options to continue to evolve this pose if that's what's asked for in the body. One example would be using your free right hand to grab the bottom leg, so those left toes behind your back, for a quadricep stretch with the spinal twist. Maybe the top leg wants to stay exactly as it is, or maybe it wants to stretch longer to also include the hamstring stretch. Perhaps left hand slides up the back side of the leg as high up as you can reach. So this could be anywhere from just a simple spinal twist to cat chasing its tail pose. So Joshua, go ahead and switch the legs out. So it's the top one that's going to be the long, and the bottom one that's the grip under. You got it. Yeah. That helps the spinal twist just a little bit more. So from this shape, let yourself start to twist even the head, gazing over that right shoulder. And keeping our eyes open, let's view this half of the room as if this was the first time we've ever seen this space. Don't take anything for granted. There's no judgments at all, but start to notice things. Notice textures. Are there any different textures going on this side of the room? And notice colors. And do you have any feelings that come up when you see certain colors? Just notice that. Maybe notice sizes. Things as small as a grain of sand to things much, much larger than us. What do we see? Imagining we had no vantage point of what we're actually seeing, we're just observing it. How curious that somebody engineered something to look like that. Continuously scanning, see if you can find something new, maybe something you've never noticed before. No matter how many times you've been in this space, a dozen, 100, 1,000 times, is there something new that you can see today? Enjoy the last 2 breaths on this side. After that second breath, the hips are going to gradually return their weight onto the ground. Before we completely switch sides, let's take this right ankle up onto left thigh. And our hands are going to thread around that left side, as long as the hip's okay with that amount of stretch. And notice how you have a very good viewpoint of this right leg, of the foot, the toes, the ankle, shin and calf, the knee. So imagine viewing this part of your own body with fresh eyes. Notice little curiosities. How interesting that feet come with hair. Looking at the bottom of the feet, of that foot, notice the textures that your foot has taken on by all the years of walking that it's learned to do. Noticing the arch of the foot and the way that the skin maybe wrinkles. Noticing any freckles. Maybe any textures or curiosities in the clothing itself. Keeping the eyes wide open and alert. What do we have here right in front of us? And have we ever taken the time to really view this leg and this foot? Being with this part of our body for 3 more breaths, continue to find this curiosity. Then as the hands release from the clasp, allow that ankle to relax, gripping onto each shin. It's almost like we have a steering wheel for our low back and hips. So notice what it's like to shift one knee up closer to the shoulder and then the other knee. It's almost like a cosmic steering wheel. What direction are we headed based on the perspective that we've had so far? And what if we could shift our perspective from viewing past to viewing future? What if time worked the other way? Noticing how perspective would be so different in that alternate reality. Now when this feels pretty good, bring the knees back together and start to let them fall all the way over to the right side. Again, this could be as simple as a spinal twist, or we could build it up to cat chasing its tail. The left hand grabbing the bottom foot, so that'll be the right one. And feeling that quad stretching now. Maybe leaving this top leg in the twist, the bent knee position. Or maybe extending that leg straighter, trying to slide the right hand further down the leg. And as the body starts to get more used to this position, begin to let the head gaze over your shoulder to the left side. And view the left half of the room as if this was your first time. What curiosities do we have going on here? What if you didn't know what things meant? Could you live in that space of this object could be anything? I could create 100 uses for that object if I didn't know what it was. Notice textures, colors, sizes that might be different here than on the first side. How does it feel to be in the space of not defining anything? Is it comfortable or uncomfortable? Take 2 more breaths right here. The second breath, we release any grip of hands. Hips return to the ground while keeping the left ankle up on right thigh. If it's possible in our body, we spread our arms around right side. And we begin to be present with this foot. How curious that this foot is a mirror image of the other. Just like a child doesn't realize that you can have shoes on the wrong side. Perhaps imagine realizing that mirror image for the first time. And notice how this foot is equal and opposite, and yet it's different. Maybe bumps and freckles and hairs that you noticed on the first side are very different on this side. Maybe there's a hole in your clothing here you've never noticed before. Maybe there's an old scar that you're remembering. And recognizing how powerful the skin is, that it can heal that well over so many years. Being curious about textures. I wonder why skin does that. Realizing the toes and the foot can be in movement, if that helps us to gain perspective of that part of our body, being to see it in different ways. Take 2 more breaths right here. As we complete the second breath, allow yourself to uncross the ankle, grab onto each shin again, and let yourself be with that steering wheel once again. Noticing how curious that feels on the sacrum, on the low back, on the hips. Noticing how gentle we can be with easing some of those muscles that we're just stretching super tightly out of that deep position. Driving our cosmic will, perhaps now neither in the past nor the future, but in the present, this everlasting now. And with the present to carry us on, let's feel ourselves rising up to a seated place. Notice this new viewpoint away from the ground. And begin to take bottoms of feet together. This can be far away, this can be close. But notice your spine lifting up and then rounding directly down to the space right in front of your feet. Hands can choose their position, arms can choose their position. But begin to notice this space directly in front of your feet. As you're looking around, what textures are visible here? Do you see any ordered, repeating patterns? Can you find anything on the floor that's not repeating, that's different, that's unique? How do those two qualities make you feel? How does it feel to be in a neat, pristine, patterned box? And how does it feel to be free of definition? To have mystery, 1 inch being different than the next inch. To be unique. Perhaps as the body releases deeper into the pose, you find your vantage point getting closer to the ground. So how does that shift things? And notice the vision directly in front of you versus peripheral vision. Notice how the peripheral vision fills in information that you don't actually know. For instance, I'm seeing color patterns in my peripheral, browns, circles that are darker brown and lighter brown. I'm seeing my shadow, but as I actually look to that space, I'm seeing that there's so many more details than my peripheral filled in. I'm seeing many, many more colors, maybe an infinite number of colors, and dots and textures. And as I look back to where I started, I start to ask myself, how much do I assume about life, just like I assume based on what my peripheral vision fills in? Do I take things for granted? What if I took nothing for granted? Enjoy another good inhale. Exhale. Having your hands find the ground, notice how your vision shifts as you start to lift yourself upward. Nothing for granted. Having explored the space in front of us, let's now explore the space behind us. Let's allow the left leg to extend forward. We pick up the right knee, but we continue to swivel the foot out to the side, setting up for a quad stretch. We begin to walk the hands to the place behind us. And be with that quad so we're never pulling the knee into injury. Maybe we just simply scoop the tailbone under and we feel the stretch happening already. If you'd like to drop to one elbow, start with the left. And then drop to the right if that's available. Sometimes it's possible to slide the elbows wider to come all the way onto our back. And notice now we can view the space that was once behind us. And notice how we've seen this vantage point before, but yet it's new. These photons that are hitting our eyeballs are different photons than we saw at the beginning of class. It's like when you step in a river, any moment that the water's passing by you, the next moment it's a very different river. So this room, this air that we're breathing, this light that we're seeing, it's all new. Even though it looks the same, it is on a molecular level absolutely 100% different. And start to notice textures that evaded you before. Maybe your ceiling or your wall has very curious designs in it. Notice how you feel taking this perspective. Does it feel comforting at all? Or do you feel something else entirely? Is there something your eye keeps on getting drawn to over and over again? And start to wonder with curiosity, I wonder why that is. What is it about that that keeps on seeking for my attention? Trying to seek for one more new thing. Notice it. Take a breath to be with it. Then let's reverse our way out of this shape, the opposite way we got into it. So if the elbows were the last thing to slide out, you slide the elbows back in. Did the head come in next? And then the hands? And then the right leg? How does this right leg feel to be stretching long now? Maybe take a breath to be with this viewpoint. Eventually we switch to have the left leg tucked out to the side. Same steps, but our body's different. Maybe the tailbone just needs to tuck. Maybe it's right elbow and then left elbow this time. Maybe you'd like to slide all the way onto your back. Same, but different yet again. What if we could imagine our body laying in this coordinate, but getting to fast forward from the beginning of time and this earth, all the way through the construction of this building, to the eventual demise of this building sooner or later, maybe 1,000 years from now, maybe only 20. All the way still in this coordinate to the end of time as Earth knows it. And how does it feel being in this coordinate? Having experienced all of it. How is your perspective different? Zooming out like we did. And if we could fast forward or rewind time, would we have done anything different? Or do we realize that changing anything in our timeline would affect everything else? Therefore, there's no need for regret. There's only presence. And how much presence we choose to embody. So one more breath from this vantage point. And we begin to reverse our way up step by step, inch by inch, until we freed up this leg. Planted both feet, picked up our hips and lifted our way into Malasana. Stay with the feet to make sure they're comfortable. Won't be here for the full increment of time that we normally do in yin class. But letting the head be free, see all that's possible to view right here in this space. Noticing what our blind spots are. And imagining we're like an owl. We're trying to see, maybe like a scientist, trying to measure how far our head can go to any direction. And if we were different like an owl, how would that be different? What blind spots would no longer be a blind spot? Now as we head into a dangling pose, we drop our hands, we straighten our legs, and we find our head in a very upside down perspective. So again, with any sort of freedom that our head would like to take on, let's imagine what life would be like if this was forevermore our vantage point. Notice your blind spots now. Perhaps many more than we had just a moment ago. Notice how curious it is to take this perspective. What if this was life? Our head being closer to the ground, so that down is up and up is down. Imagine if we left this room, we were in grass, and grass was down, the sky and the clouds were up. How curious. And is there anything about our life that we've only ever viewed in one direction? Up is up and down is down. And at least for this moment, we let ourselves completely reverse those polarities. What if down was up and up was down? Feel any resistance in that thought? Are you willing to take on, even for one moment, an opposite, or even perhaps what we would define a wrong viewpoint? And does it make you any more or any less to choose this viewpoint over that viewpoint? What if all is one? Now heading back toward Malasana, the feet go wide. Feel yourself squatting back down, enjoying that rush of blood to the head. And recognizing how much gravity plays an influence on our life. That our heart has learned how to work against gravity to get blood up to the head. But where we just were, there was no effort required from the heart to get blood to the head. And what if gravity was different and we were floating here in space trying to create this shape? How different would our perspective be then? Try to embody all that seems to be reality. 3 more breaths right in this space. When we finish our 3rd breath, we drop down gently onto our knees. We allow the hips to do any wiggles that intuitively feel nice. From here, we lift the left arm all the way to the sky. Notice your blind spots and your vantage point to this direction. And then threading the shoulder under and through. Notice everything else. You can choose what to do with that right arm. Maybe it extends forward, maybe it wraps around the back. Find a good space to enjoy. And here, start to notice that when your viewpoint is on your fingers, everything behind that goes fuzzy. And when your viewpoint goes further away to something in the distance, your fingers go fuzzy. So realize that curiosity here. It all depends on what you focus on. And everything else goes fuzzy. Everything else becomes not quite so important to our brain. So we realize this about our life. What we choose to focus on becomes our entire perspective. And everything else kind of is there. Our brain kind of fills it in. But it's much more fuzzy. We could not say specific details about the fuzzy parts. So we realize we can consciously choose where our perspective where that focus comes in. Focusing on the bright, the colorful, the vivid, the lucid, the obvious. Focusing on the harsh, the depressing, the gloomy. We can focus on any of it, and that will become our entire reality. So take a few breaths to ponder. What's the reality I wish to view? Where do my eyes need to focus on to be able to realize more of that reality in my vantage point? One more breath right here. And then find your right hand in front of your face. Gently press our way up. Perhaps explore a nice cat and a nice cow. And then back from a neutral spine, right arm starts to float. See all that you can see here. And thread this side down when you're ready. Choosing a perfect spot for the left arm to be placed in. And perhaps here, take a moment to tune into deeper senses than just the eyes. Perhaps most of our knowing about this world comes from the eyes. So now, finally, after this whole class, let's actually close our eyes. And let's be with our nose for a moment. You didn't have eyes, how could you view the world with your nose? Focusing on any touch that you're experiencing right now. If you really focus on it, can you feel the clothes on your body? Do you realize that you didn't feel your clothes until just then? What about your ears? What's the farthest away noise that you can hear? Can you find a closer noise than that? Even closer. You begin to hear your breath. Maybe you didn't realize the sound of your breath this whole class. And maybe, just maybe, you can hear your heartbeat. Take one more deep breath in. And then exhale to gently come out. We'll start to add any wiggles or any intuitive stretches our body would love to take, all the way until the point where sooner or later we're ready to release in Shavasana. No rush to get there if the body needs time. Enjoy every little moment of this experience we're sharing together. No rush to find your Shavasana, but when you get there, once again, allow the eyes to be closed. And take in the world like that. Seeing how deeply outward perhaps you can travel with your senses without the eyes. Or maybe play with tuning inward as deeply as you can go without the senses. And to deepen the inhale and the exhale. Introducing tiny movements back to the body. Movements gradually get larger and larger. Until it's like we're stretching very first thing in the morning. some point you may feel ready to take a nice fetal position to one side. Doing several good breaths until you feel ready to rise up to a comfortable seated place, sooner or later. As we join our hands together in front of the heart, we realize the two becoming the one. Just like what naturally happens with our vision, two become the one in the brain. And we realize, well, we can separate the two to feel the experiences of left hand versus right hand, or left eye versus right eye. Does it have to always be that way? And we shift perspective sometimes, or find this unified perspective. So with these types of questions to lead us onward for this marvelous day, let's wrap up the time we got to share together in this class with the sound of Om. Deep inhale now. May we be filled with light and happiness and peace. Namaste.